and how many different places it's being used. So I kind of shifted a little bit into like, why would you choose it? And and again, it's always trying to learn new things as we go along, and it's just so interesting to see, just talking to somebody who's working on a using the Dynamics platform, Power Platform, Dataverse, whatever we're calling it today, because I had to change my slides from CDS to Dataverse, and he's using for healthcare. He's working for a large healthcare provider, and they're doing telehealth. And I'm like, that's awesome. And I did that years ago with custom dev, and it was painful. And I look at the tools and capabilities we have on top of the security you get, and it's amazing. And then, I do a lot of government work, and there's a whole slew of different applications to work on there. And then back to the baseline platform, I just want to manage contacts. So it's really neat to see. It's a lot of cool stuff. That's why I always say there's always some different spin on it that I haven't thought of, and always looking to learn. I'm
licking my chops. It's interesting. Today it'll be more of an intimate, group. Like yesterday, the title was like Power Apps, and I think, people just gravitate to Power Apps, and, with dynamic, like, for example, we got a guy from Nigeria who's presenting, I think next week. He got like 55, there's 55 people signed up.
Nice.
And he's nowhere near the guru that you are. I think I need to work on the sexiness of the title, because I don't think they know that Jim Novak is a celebrity.
No, that's definitely not. The community's way smaller than you think. But in fact, there's Frank is on. He'll tell you. Celebrity doesn't go over it. Yeah, we know Frank.
I came here for Microsoft CRM. What's this Dataverse junk?
That's what we're calling it today. We'll talk tomorrow about the new name.
I wanted to rename it all to Power Builder, but they won't let me.
What is it? Or is it Lotus 123? I think that's taken, or that's open. I don't think anybody's taking that.
Here you go, Quattro Pro. There you go. Remember that
one?
Oh
my gosh, what a throwback!
What's the one? Fox.
Fox Pro. Come on.
Fox Pro. Yeah. Fox Pro, and I was going to say Foxfire, but that's a movie. It's a really, and you start saying Power Apps, it also kind of, people lean towards the mobile stuff, right? Because Canvas apps are the real, the sexy thing to show off. Mm-hmm. And mobile capabilities they're getting even more amazingly powerful as we speak. But we're building Power Apps here too. The Dataverse is an underlying platform for building Power Apps. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So it's tough to keep up, honestly. It's, so it's all good.
Now, isn't Dataverse really CDS, which was stolen from Dynamics?
No, that's exactly what it is. They just renamed it because it was going to be, what was it called before they got sued? Dataflex.
Dataflex. Idiots.
Yeah.
I laughed.
Yeah, and it's, well, and that's actually one of the things I like to talk about is it's not some newfangled thing. It's been around for 20 years. Because when did they start? 2001, 2002?
Dude, I watch Microsoft presentations. So Power Apps started with the first product with inside the Power Platform was Power BI. I'm like, no, that's not true.
Yeah, well, I mean, probably with a power in the title, because even that came from an an add-on for Excel, right?
Yeah,
Power Query, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, you're right. That's got roots in Excel.
Yeah, and it evolved, and I mean, it's like a lot of Microsoft stuff they bought. I mean, they bought CDS, which was previously Dynamics CRM. They bought all that from a company in this area. What was it? I got the name wrong all the time. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, there was a really good podcast about that. I think I don't know who did it.
Mark Smith.
Did he? Yeah, he's just the one that did the talking about the origins of all this stuff. So.
Yeah, he interviewed Aaron Elder, who he was out of Annapolis, and I keep getting the name wrong. I said it wrong. That's because I introduced Mark to Aaron because I just mentioned when we were talking, I'm like, I've been spoiled with learning this stuff because I worked with the guy that built it. But he and Jason I worked at with a company called Ascenium, which is no more. And I'm like, what better people could I work with, right? I mean, it was, and they used it as a platform before ever. They sold plenty of the commercial stuff, right? Let's just deploy a CRM solution, but they built solutions on top of it. I mean, it was, Aaron liked to claim that he was one of the first to use XRM, and that's always one of those fun stories. You never know how true it is, but he was there. He was one of the original engineers on it.
XRM is kind of common because of the term XBase because of DBase. So
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
a lot
and
of
that's
people are using it from. You couldn't use the term DBase because of Ash and Tate suing everyone. So so that's why XBase term came out.
but now it's kind of neat to see the evolution of it. And again, it's one thing I like to remind people. And again, if you've ever talked to customers about this, it's not new, you know, because a lot of people ask like, okay, is this going to be another product that just goes by the wayside because it's not popular anymore? I'm like, no, it's just a little bit of rebranding, lots of re-architecture, lots of stuff happening. It's not just gloss and you know, putting glitter on it. There's a lot of stuff happening. It's really cool, but you know, it's been around for a long time. It's proven technology, which is pretty cool.
You know, the favorite thing is probably every year at the, you know, July kickoff meetings, the sales reps are probably going to be like, hey, are we allowed to use XRM this year? And
Yeah.
and they all have bets on it, you know, because every other year they said if they were allowed to use it.
Well, they've got lots of buzzwords they throw out there. When Power Platform first came out, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what Common Data Service was. I didn't understand what Common Data Model was. It wasn't working for me. And it was like 2-3 years ago, and it was at a before they did Ignite. It was the local event, you know, held downtown DC, and they were throwing Citizen Developer around. And it was around that time, it was one of the first, you know, app of the day sessions I sat through, and it's like they pulled up, okay, let's bring up Common Data Service, and they pulled up the CRM solution dialogue. I'm like, oh, okay, you know, because prior to that it was something different.
I was training the Navy, and one day doing the customization, you know, the next day it comes in on the top left-hand corner, it says, you know, Powerapps or whatever.
Yeah.
The customization.
Well, but again,
That's
that's a selling point for it. It's been there for a while. It's you know, they're building on top of existing technology. It's not flash in the pan. I mean, we've seen technology over the years, not just Microsoft, just come and go, come and go, come and go.
My other favorite thing is I was in a Azure thing and they're talking about logic apps and pushing logic apps on people. I'm like, hey, what about you know, Flow at the time, right? They're like, the Azure apps are like, we don't know what that is.
Yeah. Well, they don't, you know, it's tough to keep up. There's so much happening. You know?
Well, you know, Flow is built on top of logic apps, so
Oh,
you
yeah.
would assume
No.
that they would know what Flow is. You know, I mean.
Yeah, but they don't. You know, the different teams, they're heads down. They're building stuff. They don't necessarily. I got pulled in at one point to Microsoft to talk about the Power Platform to their Azure team, and it was similar to this. We did, you know, kind of a app of the day kind of stuff, and it was a couple-hour session, because even, you know, in Microsoft they just weren't really aware of it, and it's all becoming enmeshed. You know, at this point, everything is obviously dependent upon Azure, and you know, everything moving to the cloud. It's all coming together. So there's so much to keep up on. It's what we were talking about right before you jumped on, is it's almost impossible to keep up with everything. So always something new to learn. Keeps it exciting.
So I don't know if you know this or not, I'm actually doing work now for Worldwide Learning. And so I'm involved with the mock development, all the course development, not on
Nice.
the Power Platform stuff, but
Yeah, you're doing security now.
Right. And I have to tell you, you know, it's like, it really sucks pushing out content knowing that it's already out of date. Right. It sucks. You know, it really sucks, you know, and that just, you know, that just happened to me. Right. So,
Yeah.
So, you know, but then again, it's kind of job security. I'll probably be back, you know, the 3-day Sentinel course will probably have to go to 4 to 4.5 days, you know, 6 months from now. So, you know, hopefully they'll have me back, and
Well, these slides we're looking at, these slides we're looking at changed 3 times. Started out with Dataflex, and you know, I submitted a session, and then 2 weeks later they're getting sued, and then I changed it back to CDS, then I changed it to
everybody
Dataverse.
Knew they were going to get sued. The only one that didn't know that they were going to get sued was Microsoft. I mean, that was just the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, you know, it happens.
But that you know, I was hoping that because you know, before they got rid of Ballmer, I mean, the arrogance of Microsoft was unbelievable, right? So I was hoping that it was just a mistake instead of the arrogance that they had before. So
I think there was a little bit of cross communications, you know, miscommunication. So the Dataverse looks like it's okay, and they, you know, that's another, you know, name that's been out there, but it looks like they're sticking with it. So I think we're at noon now. We're just sitting here babbling. So I don't know if you want to kick things off. They want to take up your time.
Oh yeah, sure. Boy, I see Brent Jackson from yesterday. He attended our InfoPath Powerapps presentation yesterday. Thanks for coming again, Brent. Look forward to having you chime in. And Idaho, thank you for coming. Idaho is a SharePoint lookbook expert. Glad to have you. He gave a presentation previously. And you guys are lucky because Jim is absolutely a MVP stud in the world of SharePoint, Microsoft Technologies, Power Platform specifically. I'm gonna get his autograph virtually. I mean, he's so well known in this space. But I'm gonna turn the microphone over to Jim, and Jim, please feel free to ask around the room to have everybody introduce themselves.
Let me jump in here and say something about Jim, okay? First of all, so I've been dealing with, Dynamics Power Platform forever, and right now Jim is the only person I'm willing to send work to, number one. And not only because of his technical capability, but my experience with Jim was he actually attended one of the presentations I was making at Microsoft, and he went back and he wrote a blog about it. And so most of the time when people go and write a blog about something you've said, they normally take all the credit, right? Jim actually gave me credit, which, is unusual out there in the tech world. I don't know if anybody's experienced that or not. So so not only do I send him work or try to send him work when he's available because of his technical capability, but he's definitely has character. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Big heart.
You guys. It's funny. That's actually a really good example of we were talking again, Frank, but before you jumped on, that there's always something new to learn. So I sat in your session, and part of it was to learn something, part of it was to network, and it was, you had talked about using actions in CDS, Dataverse, whatever we're calling it today, as a web service. And it's funny because I'd actually been doing it, but I didn't think about it in that way. And then it opened up a world of possibilities, right? So it was one of those things where it's like, it wasn't like some brand new technology that I learned. It was a different twist and a different approach to using something that we're already familiar with. And that's critical in these kind of things, So whenever we go out and we talk and we share information, I went there thinking like, oh, I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh crap, I didn't know about that. That's pretty cool. And I already know how to use it. It was just a different approach. And I think that's the kind of stuff from these kind of talks are pretty important.
Yeah, and you've done many of these, Jims. I mean, you're on the circuit. You're donating your time, and you're giving light to all of us pioneers who are just getting into this world. Thank you for your service.
Well, cool. You said you want to do introductions. You already
no,
around the room, or
I'm going to let you go around the room and ask people where they're from, and tell us a little bit about what they do and what they want to learn.
You got it. I'd say. We've been talking a lot. So Randy, you were on earlier, and you want to jump in and say hello? And
hello.
Oh, you're done.
I'm done. Let's see. 30 years as an IT tech with a major delivery company. Not the new one, not the brown one, but let's see, certified ethical hacker, AWS cloud, Linux, Cisco was my big thing, hardware. So yeah, just been around, just trying to learn as much as I can to stay ahead of the curve.
Awesome. Cool. I think we have Brent is next.
Brent Jackson, work for Guardworld Federal Services. I'm a data analyst. We currently use Dynamics 365 on-prem, and it's an old, no longer supported version. And so we're in the early stages of planning on migrating it to 365. So that's
awesome.
why I'm here, to learn as much as I can.
Awesome. We have Frank, you want to say hi? We were talking earlier, but I don't know if you introduced yourself.
Yeah, I'm Frank Greenberg. I've been doing IT stuff for, I forget how many years now, since 86, something like that. So how many every years that is? 85 maybe. So I do a lot of Microsoft stuff. I've been around the Dynamics Power Platform stuff for a little while. I'm looking forward to a killer presentation. Thanks.
And who's next? Our list is shuffling around. We got Idaho.
Yeah, hey. So CL hit me up about this, and I thought I'd look in and see if there's anything interesting to learn. I'm mostly a SharePoint guy, but I was hoping to maybe pick up something that I can use with the Power Platform, use the looking to do some automation on my website with common data platform. So
we're calling it Dataverse these days, so you have to get the copyright correct. No, that's cool. Definitely good stuff. I think a lot of this should be familiar to you. Definitely not a SharePoint guru myself, so I'm definitely looking forward to some feedback on this. We have Joel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joel Miliacho. I currently work for Getty Images, doing account management. I've been in sales for about past 15, maybe 20 years. I don't know, I lost sense of time. I am new to HugoNet, and I'm here just really to gain as much knowledge as I can, so I can become an asset to the HugoNet team from a sales perspective.
Cool. And we have Jose. Still unmute if you're there, or just being shy, which is totally fine.
Yeah, Jim, while we're waiting for Jose, we're looking into using Dynamics 365 for integration with LinkedIn, Sales Navigator. So that's one of the big reasons why Joel is here too.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, there's a that's more into the product side, but there's lots of cool capability. They're still building that stuff out, and it's one that changes a bit just because all the products that they integrate with change. So it's a little bit hard to keep up with. Well, cool. Well, Jose, jump in when you're ready, but I guess we'll just get rolling here. It's kind of nice having a small crowd. Feel free to jump in with questions. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. This is not meant to be super formal. I like having conversations more than talking at people. So feel free to jump in, comments, questions, suggestions, corrections, whatever you got. So basically just want to talk about Dataverse and model-driven apps as an enterprise solutions platform. Let me see if I can move to the next slide. There we go. That's me, just a little bit of information. We talked about this earlier, just some contact information. Business applications MVP in my second year. Pretty cool to be part of the community there. It's like we talked about, you think you know stuff, and then you start talking to people and you realize how little you know, or a more positive approach is what more you have to learn, right? And I always look at it in that perspective. It's exciting to be around a community of people that are willing to share information and are so ridiculously smart. So what are we going to talk about? So what is Dataverse? Basically define it. Let's talk about what it is, where it came from. We've already talked a little bit about the history during our chat before the session, and it's been around for a long time. And then what I want to do is look at some of the core features that are offered up for business solutions specifically, because it's enormous. There's so much stuff going on in the Dataverse pool of tools, the solution platform, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot going on. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that might come up whenever you're evaluating a platform for building enterprise solutions. And then if you make the decision to go with Dataverse, how are you going to benefit from it? What are you going to get out of it if you make this move? Whether it's a new, was it greenfield, I think is the phrase, solution, or migrating one to a new platform. And then back up a little bit and we'll look at the Power Platform as a whole very, very quickly and see how Dataverse fits into it. And then some examples of Dataverse solutions. And then we'll just dive in and we'll build something real quick and we'll look at a working example of a model-driven app built on Dataverse. I have to admit, I still feel a little bit silly calling it Dataverse. It just sounds kind of like Masters of the Universe or Marvel Universe or something, but it is what it is. So what is it? So Dataverse is, definition right off the website. It's always an easy way to do an introduction. Dataverse lets you securely store and manage data that is used by business applications. And I'm like, that's actually a pretty good definition. It's a little bit of marketing, but it also gets a message across. The way I translate that is what they leave out is it allows you as a non-developer or even developers to build out enterprise grade cloud hosted relational database services. And I said that a little bit it's a mouthful, but the database services part of it, the services bit of it is a little bit more important these days than it used to be. As Frank and I were talking about earlier, it's built on what used to be, right? It's an evolution of the Dynamics CRM platform from years past, CRM 1.2, 3.0, 4.0, 2011, the whole 9 yards. It evolved into what we now call Dataverse. And what that is it used to just be SQL Server and a couple of related services. It was a really cool database design tool, is the way I looked at it, with a workflow engine, allowed you to design out data input forms, allowed you to apply business logic to the data entry. And once records are saved, it had a whole extensibility platform, which we'll talk about. But the reason I mentioned services as opposed to just building a database is it's more than just a front end on top of SQL Server. You're integrating with other services in Azure. One of the new ones that's come out recently is the image file type, or sorry, field type. Instead of a string or a number or a date, I can have what's called an image. And that's stored in a different location than SQL Server for performance purposes. If anybody's worked in Dynamics in the past, you know that storing files in Dynamics was a bad idea, even though they allowed you to do it. That's where the SharePoint integration came in. But now they're abstracting it from you, and I just have a field type called picture, image, right? And it allows me to store that transparently. I don't really care where it's stored. When I get my record back, I can also get an image back. That's pretty cool. If anybody's written code to do that, you know that it takes a lot of work to do that, make it efficient, store it, persist it, make it searchable, all that fun stuff. But with Dataverse, you've got a series of tools that allow you to build this without having to write a line of code. So back to the citizen developer thing we were talking about before, you don't have to be a hardcore coder developer to build stuff here. You can build a fully functional enterprise system that is stored in the cloud, relational database with data entry forms, validation, without writing a single line of code. And that's pretty huge. And the other part of it is that's pretty important when you get into these different industries. And there's a whole effort within Microsoft to expand into more industry focused, what they call them accelerators. And that's changing a little bit in terms of marketing as well. But it's built on it's an implementation of the common data model. And the common data model, I have a link for this towards the end, is an industry specification on stuff they've been working with for a long time. To the pop-up that we're all pretty familiar with is an account and a contact. How do I manage businesses and people, right? That's where the customer relationship came in. And you know what, hey, here's a proposal for how to persist data related to accounts and contacts. Here's a person or a business or both, and it can be either. And here's our proposal for how do we persist this information? What's the data type? How are they related? All that fun stuff is in the common data model, which is again a specification, and then the Dataverse backend implementation, the backend solution implements this common data model. So if I go in and I have two different solutions built on Dataverse and they both deal with contacts and accounts, if I leverage that for managing whether it's a healthcare business or a government institution, I know that they're going to speak the same language in terms of data and how the relationships of the data do work. So that's a pretty cool deal. And it's evolved over time. This isn't just something they threw out recently. It's evolved over, pushing 20 years at this point. And it's a pretty cool thing whenever you build an enterprise solution and you want to have kind of a standard amongst all your solutions. Let's say you're a large enterprise like a federal government, you might have 10 different solutions that leverage the same data, or at least need to talk the same language if they're in separate data stores. And having that common data model as a published specification is a pretty cool thing.
All right, Jim, since you said I was allowed to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So first question is, so a lot of this new functionality, probably with the files and everything else, is coming with the fact that they're now breaking out Dataverse in the back end to also use Cosmo DB. Is that correct?
Yep, they use Cosmo, Azure File Storage, or Blob Storage, that kind of stuff.
So basically, anybody that's thinking on-prem, you might as well forget it.
I don't know. On-prem is up to version 9, they might be on 9.1, but there hasn't been an announcement for the on-prem support. So it's pretty close in parity, but for stuff like that, yes, you're absolutely right. And there's some other stuff like enterprise search capabilities aren't related, way prior to the new file types and whatnot. Like you couldn't do enterprise search because it was relying on Azure search, right? So that's absolutely a hot topic for a lot of people, especially in like the government space, the DoD. We're not going to upgrade. You have to be on-prem. Microsoft is kind of dragging their feet on support for it. You can still get an enormous amount of capability, but you're going to be limited to what's available on-prem versus you're not going to be accessing things that are only available on the cloud.
Okay. Now the common data model has been a pet peeve of mine for a while. Have they dropped the requirement that when you create the Dataverse database that you agree to sign over your data structures to them for a CDM, the rights?
I haven't seen that at all.
So when you actually go ahead and create a Dataverse database, inside the, when you create an environment, then you create a database. When you create the database, there's a little thing that pops up that says, hey, by the way, we have the right to utilize your structures for CDM.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. Yeah, so if it's been there, I haven't seen it, so maybe they dropped it.
I'll take a look. That's, you don't get that when you're going through Dynamics, but when you're doing it through just creating an environment, that's the thing that pops up when you're creating the database. So that has been
it totally could have been there. I might just be one of those where I'm not reading the terms of service, right? Because yeah, I totally understand. I mean, and it's a good point. There's two different things we're talking about on that point. We're talking about creating a Dataverse environment, what's formerly called CDS, just a bare bones environment outside of a product which is built on it, right? So Dynamics 365 CRM is using Dataverse, right? So two different modes. But yeah, I haven't seen that at all. I'll ask about it, but I haven't seen it. And I'll try it again because I have a clean environment that we can I just created one in the environment we're looking at, which I don't know if I have Dynamics in it or not.
I'll see if they dropped it because that's been something that in the industry, there's just been the whole thing about, hey, you're basically mining our structures, but we can't utilize the opportunity entity. You're restricting us. So
yeah,
you're saying that's actually that's your intellectual property, but hey,
right.
our structures are not intellectual property, and you're allowed to mine them just because we're utilizing your product.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure. Like I said, I've never noticed that, and it totally makes sense. You're handing over your IP if you build something there, and I think that'd make a lot of people mad and immediately stop using. I'm not even going to pursue it anymore, right? And I know that there's been some talk about opening up CDM and opening up some of the other entities to be more open, right? Be more accessible for stuff that might be in a product. I think they're looking at shuffling around, and the CDM is being updated continuously, by the way. So all the industry accelerators are building. I didn't realize how.
Of course, because they're mining everybody's structures. So of course.
Well, they're putting their own out too.
I'm just joking.
No, I know, but they're building industry accelerators and they're putting their own out too. So and we'll get into this in a bit. So the CDM is being updated way more frequently than I thought. I thought there was this huge process around it, but talking to some of the product owners, they're basically saying, and you can go look at the history of it if you go to the website for CDM. There's a link for it later that it'll tell you when it's been updated. It could be a very granular change to a field or an entire entity structure. So definitely something to look at. I wasn't aware of that, but I'll definitely follow up on it. Cool. So that's a little bit about it. That's kind of the background about it. And again, as we mentioned before, it's an evolution. It's been around for a long time. They've pulled out the CRM stuff and made it first-class citizens in its own right. You can build these solutions. And what are we talking about when we talk about that underlying Dataverse set of core tools? First thing I mentioned is data's in the name. Data's everywhere. Data. Well, you can do data modeling. And I talked about it building a relational system. You can build out a complex relational solution. And another name change, I'll make sure my slides are up to date. Used to be called entities and attributes. Now they're called tables and columns. And with that, you can build out a relational system. If you're familiar with Access or SQL Server or Oracle or any of these other relational database systems, you have a table and you have columns. And you can build that in Dataverse, and they're all relational, and you've got an abstraction layer on top of it, so you don't have to worry about the SQL statements. You point and click, and you say new table, and you put in a name, and they give you some prompts for some data around it. You build a new relationship, so you don't have to understand foreign keys. It's just done for you, and it's been optimized. So with this layer of abstraction, it's amazingly performant. And there's been several studies done on this for years about the performance of the platform. I'll just say, because it started out, I think I saw a paper all the way back to CRM4, working with millions of records. So it's pretty powerful, even for a lot of times you get these frameworks that kind of slow things down, bog things down. It's actually pretty performant, given you've got layers of abstraction that protect you from the underlying implementation. So now you've built your data model. You've got this cool schema that we were just talking about. I got this really cool, either proprietary or I've extended, the out of the box stuff that they give you to give you accounts and contacts. And we'll look at that when we jump into the system. What I want to do is I want to build an app around that, right? Cool, I got this database, but it's kind of not very helpful unless I kind of gather things together and give my users a targeted experience. And that's kind of what I refer to model-driven apps as. It's a collection of your elements within your Dataverse solution, and it gives the end user a targeted experience. So let's say you've got a system for case management. You might have account people, and you might have the case management people, and they each want to see their own side of things. I want to see invoices as a salesperson, but I want to see cases as a caseworker. And that's where you can have a model-driven app for each. And we'll look at some examples of these downstream. So it's a way of kind of grouping all your stuff together and presenting it in one way, as opposed to the old way of ripping out a whole bunch of things you didn't want to see. On top of this data, now you've got a presentation for your end user. How do I automate some of the business processes? Because cool, we've got a database system, and I've got a way of delivering it to my end users, allowing them to collect the data, do data input on your forms. How can I make their life easier, right? I don't want to just give them more work to do with entering in a whole bunch of stuff. I want to have, complex data validation. I want to have, some automation of creating of data. And there's a whole slew of methods of doing business processes. What we're looking at here in the screen capture is, and this is right off of the website, the documentation. So if you've looked at this, it should be familiar. What we're looking at there is what's called a business process flow. And that's a more visual method of kind of giving you a snapshot of where you are in the process of handling this challenge is the record we're looking at. So where are you in working with this challenge? A very common one is out of the box with case management. You've got a series of stages in responding to a case, and they've got like discovery and research and things like that. It allows you to put a very nice user interface on top of what your end user is seeing with point and click configuration. And you can also automate some stuff happening behind the scenes. When I click that next page button, I can have a workflow kickoff to pre-populate some data. I can go look up some information. I can do some validation. I can even call out into an external system, which we'll look at next. So it brings with it not just the data modeling, not just the presentation of here's some cool forms to enter the data, but I can start automating it and doing some validation on it to make my life easier for my end users. And here is a little bit more on the slides continued. I'm going to jump to the extensibility platform that we talked about before with the business processes. If I hit next on one of my stages, I may want to call out to a plugin, for example, which is C# code that I can intercept certain events happening on the underlying platform, the CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, and several other things happening. I can respond to that and write some code against it if I hit a point where configuration doesn't work for me. So I can extend it, and I can automate some of those procedures with my inline business process point and click. I can then also call into my other more powerful stuff where I need a developer. So everything up until that point was developer free. Now, if you need to have a developer, if you hit a limit to the platform, which it's not the be all end all solution, you can have a developer step in and customize both the back end and also the front end. But back up one slide, maybe I'll switch this around next time I talk about this. Security is also key. So I've got data model, I'm gathering data from my users, I'm presenting it to them. Now I want to secure it. I want to make sure people only see what they're allowed to see and make sure people who shouldn't see things shouldn't see stuff. We mentioned the medical world. What if I have medical records and I should only have certain people who are caring for a patient look at those medical records? I can configure a security model around that and make sure only the people see what they should see. And before I even get into the system, we leverage Azure Active Directory for your authentication. So first off, I got out-of-the-box authentication using Azure AD. Then I've got authorization within using the security tools built into Dataverse. And again, that one is insanely powerful. It can be clunky and people complain about it a good bit, but whenever you think about how to implement it yourself, writing the code for it yourself, it's pretty darn powerful, and you start to really like it as a developer. And then back down to the bottom of the slide, external integrations. You can integrate from external systems. I can build an entire new front end on this if I want to. I can build a website that talks to all of my Dataverse entities and even metadata behind the scenes using endpoints that are offered up as part of the platform. There's a REST endpoint. They have the old school, WCF-based endpoints, the SOAP-based stuff. So I can go out and in fact, there's a product called Portals, which we'll glance at briefly here, that does exactly that. It was a product built by a third-party company. Microsoft bought them and brought them into the platform, but they built basically a website builder that is based in Dataverse, used to be CRM, and it allows you to put an externally facing website serving up data from your Dataverse database. And that's some pretty powerful stuff. You can use it for very simple integrations, calling out to another service, whether it's a Power Automate flow or a custom web service, or you can completely customize your front end if you'd really like to. So that's some pretty cool stuff, and that's all built in. And the cool thing about all this is the security that you define in your security model is also applied. The authentication and authorization is all built in through those services as well. So those are the core features that we've talked about. Again, feel free to jump in, cut me off if I'm babbling a bit.
I did just check that they actually took away that requirement when you're creating CDS to share your data structures. So cool. I guess enough people screamed about it that and stopped enough deals that they made that change. Maybe it's just in the licensing agreement overall, but you don't have to click the button anymore agreeing to it.
Yeah, I would be surprised if that was still true. So cool. So that's good to know. So your stuff is secure whenever you build it. So we just talked about all these capabilities, right? So and if anybody has any questions about the capabilities, let me know. But cool, let's say that's awesome. I want to do that. I want to have my functional analysts go in and build things. I want to have my developers come in and build things. Let's choose a platform. What does it do for us? How do I say it's not just cool, but how do we define what my ROI is, right? What's my return on investment in this platform? So I've mentioned it a couple of times, but the low code, no code platform is something I'm sure you've read about. It's been in some very popular, I don't want to say Forbes, but stuff like that. Industry magazines talking about this low code, no code revolution. And Microsoft's not the only one doing it. Salesforce is another example of designing out a solution. There's a whole bunch of other ones, and Microsoft is their cut is the Power Platform. So this low code, no code platform means that I can have my functional team come in without any development experience and build an enormous part of the solution for me, right? And as a developer, then I can focus my time on where my skills are best met. So I don't have to come in and worry about building out screens or worrying about authentication, worry about authorization. I don't have to worry about the security model. I can focus, and in fact, you may never need a developer for your solution at all. You might be able to do everything through point and click. So low code, no code is no joke. Maybe I'm going to put that on a sticker or something, because it really does give you the capability for large organizations, small organizations to build out enterprise scale solutions without having to write a line of code. The other part of it is it's a common platform, right? If I have 5 systems and they're all built on Power Platform, we're all speaking the same language for the underlying platform. If I jump from one solution, I have a good idea of what's happening in that other solution. I can go in and where do I look at the data model? Okay, jump into the solution, look at the tables, look at the columns, look at all the stuff related to it, as opposed to a custom dev solution, which again, if you've worked in this, it could be anything. And it's really up to the developers where they persist things, how they check things in the code, how much they automate stuff. So it's a very, very well-structured, well-defined, common platform for building solutions. And I can easily jump between solutions and help out as a developer or a functional analyst. We can all speak the same language. We can all come in and we know about the tools. So the learning curve is very much lower. And if you want to fire up a new solution, you have a group of people that are already familiar, they can jump in and do some work. The other part of it is because it's a common platform, Microsoft's also built in some tools for sharing things. So a solution is a mechanism for moving your code around. If I'm building a custom dev solution, and again, it's been ages since I've done it, I have to build up a deployment package, I have to write an installation package, whether it's a website or a desktop client or a database or whatever it is, I have to deploy it, I have to manage all that. Microsoft built in tools into the Dataverse platform for downloading and deploying your solution from one environment to the next, or from one customer to the next. I can build shared solutions and hand them. They have it's called AppSource, I believe, or that may have changed, where I can put out a solution that I want people to either purchase or have for free. And that's pretty cool because then it's all done in a common method. You can rely on most everything being included, and it's expanding as we speak. There are some limitations to it, and Microsoft is actually investing a lot of time and effort into extending it to make it more inclusive for different components. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But that's a pretty cool feature. Again, as a developer, I've gotten a bit lazy, and not having to do all this deployment, to just download a solution and move it over. That's a pretty cool feature. And again, that's something that you can say you're going to save time on your ALM process, your SDLC, whatever you want to call it, however you guys identify this within your solution, or sorry, within your enterprise. That's something that's baked into the Dataverse platform. And then your consolidated IT infrastructure. That's another mouthful. It basically says everything is in the cloud, as Frank was alluding to earlier. Even if it's on-prem, you still have one method for managing things. You still have to manage the servers. But when you're in the cloud and you're on the latest and greatest version of Dataverse, you got one place to go. And in fact, when I kick off, Frank mentioned he just tested this, probably went into Office 365, went over to his Power Platform environment, and he had all these administrative tools that are owned by your IT department. If your organization already has Office 365, let's say for Active Directory or Exchange or SharePoint, you can easily just add a license to Dataverse and bring up a database and manage all your environments in one place. So, and you don't have to build out servers. It's all, I don't want to say magic in the cloud. There's a lot to it. That's about 5 other talks on how to manage and administer all this stuff. And Microsoft is actually putting out a whole series of tools. One of them is called the Center of Excellence, and it's for specifically managing all these instances, but it's much, much lower overhead. And if you don't want it, turn it off. It's a subscription, right? When you get into enterprise customers, there's obviously a little bit different, a lot more going on there. But me I'm going right now, bring up a credit card and have a Dataverse environment up in about 15 minutes. For enterprise solutions, you're going to be talking about your enterprise agreement, talking to your vendors and all that fun stuff. In the government, of course, it's always just a little bit more complicated. But the fact is, here's an account, here's how you manage and administer things. You don't have to go to another data center and fire up servers that you have to administer, manage, do licensing, do upgrades, all that fun stuff. And that's a pretty big benefit. That lowers the cost for your IT team. And again, it's pretty well kept up to date. It's not like I have to patch these servers that are, worked on a project recently where the servers are like 14 years old and they were out of compliance, and that's why they brought us in to migrate. So you don't have that really as a concern. Other side of it is, you're pushed and it keeps you up to date. The side benefit of that puts a bit of pressure on you to keep up to date, but it's made much easier than if you were managing physical hardware. And my graphic, because I have to have graphics in my slides, I have too many words. It allows you to focus more on solving your business problem as opposed to working on the plumbing, and as I have in quotes. And I mentioned it earlier, I'm not going to worry about making sure you can log in. That's built in. So your authentication is built in. Your authorization is configurable, all the security stuff. I don't have to worry about how to render the screen. I've got a designer for that. I can focus on, as a developer, the features and functionality as opposed to the plumbing that a lot of times in custom dev you had to do. I worked in a system years and years ago where I had to manage the security, and I'm doing air quotes, which you can't see, very loose security model compared to what you see in Dynamics. That was painful. I had to spend an enormous amount of time writing that code, maintaining it, testing it, owning it, fixing bugs. And that had nothing to do with the actual capabilities of the customer. It was just making sure they didn't see stuff they shouldn't see. And now I don't have to do that. So that's a big sell for your development team. Developers may not like it. You have to give up a little bit of control, but it allows you to focus and build out cool functionality as opposed to, again, standard plumbing that everybody sees in their system. And that's a big selling point for me. So those are just, again, and I'm sure, and if anybody has any other like, hey, by the way, this is good too, or a con, feel free to chime in. But this is just the stuff that really I see a lot in conversations with potential customers. So backing up a little bit, we talked about Power Platform earlier on, and it's kind of hard to talk about because it's huge, right? And it's changing every day we talk. And this is just, I believe, the latest slide, even got the latest icons for it. But where does Dataverse fit into the Power Platform as a whole? Because it is kind of hard to talk about, and it's growing. So Dataverse is a key element, right? And I'm reading my slide, and it's not good presentation, but it's a key element. It's a lot of stuff is built on Dataverse as a back-end platform. It's your data service, right? So I've got a Power App. We mentioned model-driven apps. They're completely dependent upon Dataverse. So it's a little bit weird to talk about a model-driven app as a Power App because it's part of Dataverse, as part of the tool set. So it's a little bit confusing and fuzzy to talk about. But Power BI, Power App, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents can all leverage Dataverse in their functionality one way or another. It can be a back-end data store for all of your Power Automate flows into your data, and you're connecting to an external service. All kinds of stuff is dependent upon Dataverse. And one of that's not even in that graph is Powerapps Portals, which I mentioned before. Again, back in the day, I wanted to have, they don't really like to tell people this, but I don't want to have licenses for every Dynamics user in my system. So I'm going to build a portal and allow people who aren't licensed to access it. And that's not it's not really always just cheating licensing. You may not want them to see all the data in your system. You may not want to administer things. So what they built was this Powerapps Portal solution, formerly called ADX Portals, ADX Studio, pardon me. And it was basically a website that used Dataverse. At the time, it was Dynamics 365 CRM as its data layer. It persisted all the data, all the configuration. It's like WordPress. It's a content management system for Powerapps, and now it's Dataverse. I'm getting all my names mixed up now. So it's a portal system, a content management system built on Dataverse. So that's one they don't even mention, but it's gaining some popularity, it's gaining some momentum, and it's a pretty powerful platform. So Dataverse is key. It's a key element of the Power Platform as a whole. And again, there's more to it than this. This is probably out of date because it's probably 2 weeks old. Let's see. So what are some examples of Dataverse model-driven apps? Well, we talked about these products for a long time, right? So Dynamics CRM, it's now, as of I believe it was V9, they re-architected the whole system and they pulled out what it was called CDS at the time, and then they built customer service on top of it. So Dynamics 365 products, first-party Dataverse model-driven app solutions. They're model-driven apps built on Dataverse. So it used to be all entwined in one. Now they're eating their own dog food is a phrase that always sounds kind of strange to me, but they're building on top of Dataverse for their first-party solutions, for customer service, for sales, for marketing, field services, project operations. And there's more to it, more to those different solutions, marketing especially, field services especially. But underlying structures that are persistent with contacts, accounts, and all the other security and all that are built in Dataverse.
Jim, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So, Power Automate is the future of everything. Have they, they don't want you to develop plugins anymore, obviously. Have they actually started migrating the first-party apps away from plugins and CDS and started using Power Automate as they've been telling everyone to do, or are they still using plugins in the first-party apps?
No, plugins are there, and I don't think plugins are going away. I think old school workflows are eventually going to go away. The Windows Workflow Foundation-based workflows, they're eventually going to go away. And they've been talking about that for a while, but they haven't. They're still deploy a new environment, even there's.
But realistically speaking, they're really trying to push people just to utilize the web API and get away from plugins.
Yeah, I understood, and you can create your own connections, but plugins still do a lot that Power Automate can't do. First one that comes up, one of the reasons they haven't just pulled the trigger, and this is strictly an opinion, is they're asynchronous by nature, right? There are ways of hacking and making them synchronous, but I don't think it's supported at all. It seems to work, but I wouldn't recommend it. And so just that alone, you need something to be synchronous. So that I don't think plugins are going to go away. And in fact, I think plugins are a big part of the platform itself. If they go and move everything over to Power Automate, then you're also going to have the call limits too. So
my issue is the focus by them to drive people to Power Automate when plugins would actually be a better solution. And that continues today. I see. I don't see that. I see them getting you away from old school workflows, but not plugins. I think that they want you to use Flow for a lot of things because it puts the hands into a designer as opposed to a coder. But there are just things that are going to be done more efficiently in plugins until Power Automate changes a little bit. So I totally see and sitting on some of the calls with the product team, they're talking about it, but they don't give you any clear answer. So there's no NDA stuff I'm giving away here. Were you and ISV Connect the past few days?
No.
Okay.
But they've been talking about it for a while, and the question's been asked: when are we going to deprecate workflows? When are you going to have a tool to migrate workflows? So I don't see Flow, because again, there's too much going on. And again, just an opinion, and based on what I'm seeing, I think Power Automate is the way of the future for lots of things. But until they can first and foremost make it synchronous, and lift the limits on them, because that's something I just ran into over the last couple of weeks. You've got execution limits, right? So you're not going to have a high performance system if you limit you throttle the executions. People just aren't going to use it. So I think they have to address some of those things before they can say plugins. So I think workflows, but not plugins.
So I completely agree with everything you're saying. I'm just saying the messaging from them has been, they almost like plugins are there, but they try to ignore their existence and all of their material, because I don't think they want to support the compute side inside their servers.
Yeah,
That's just
I'm just not
opinion.
seeing that. Yeah, I'm not seeing that message. They might be talking about it because they're pushing
It's not that they're telling people to change. It's that they're just not really mentioning plugins.
No, I understand, and that might be because they're trying to sell the low code, no code solution, right? That's because even in Power Automate there's code, and it frustrates people, and I think maybe that's why they're doing it. And again, like you said, maybe just not mentioning it. Oh, it's low code, no code, right? Or maybe they're not really aware. A lot of people might not be aware of the plugin side because, they're fairly new to the platform and it's low code. Why would I ever want to write code? Why would I want to plug in? So again, we'll see, obviously, right? I don't pretend to have all the answers there.
And do you see them with the fact that now you can do Dataverse, whatever it's called, for Teams? I don't know what the actual name is. I mean, how does that change the messaging? Because I think that version and the basic version with inside Teams doesn't even allow plugins.
No, I don't think so. As far as I know, I was testing it when they were in the beta phase, and it was neat, but I don't think it's meant for enterprise scale data. I think it's meant for, quick collaboration is the way I see it.
I mean, the future for the Powerapps push is going to be through Teams. There's no doubt about it.
Well, but you can shift it and migrate and upgrade too using full-blown Dataverse if you need that, right?
No, I agree, but I'm saying that the push that they're going to make is going to be everything through Teams.
Yeah, and they're adding more integration there. They have a rough integration with Dynamics 365, very, very simple integration, pop it up onto a tab, and that's pretty much it. And the Dataverse for Teams is pretty functional, but it's very limited in terms of database size and capabilities. But, because you can upgrade and say, okay, I want to integrate with full-blown Dataverse as opposed to Dataverse Lite, which I don't know what it's called. Don't quote me on that. I don't think that limits them. It's like, oh, you want the light version? Cool. I'm going to pay less. It's going to be very easy to manage. But I've got more enterprise grade solutions. Cool. Just flip the switch and upgrade to the full version. And I think they're adding hooks into that. I haven't kept up on the Teams integration. Like I said, I was on the testing whenever it first came out, but I didn't have my problem is, I don't really see a use for this, in my world, because a lot of the customers that I work with don't use Teams. So, doing the federal stuff, they just don't use Teams. So I'm definitely curious. I'm with you on, I want to see where it goes, but I can't predict where it's going to go. I think they're kind of keeping the door open for both. Hey, here's a cool lightweight version of doing things, but you want the full enterprise, flip the switch and integrate with first party Dataverse.
So when we talk about citizen developers, I mean, because we're talking about so many different components, Power Automate, then you got CDS, model driven. I mean, how does the citizen developer deal with the fact that there's so many different components that have to work together? I mean, or is the citizen developer, it just has to be so simple apps that they're only utilizing one of those components? I just don't understand how they're expecting the citizen developer to understand all these different, things that they have to learn because they're utilizing multiple solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And then as a developer, I'm in the same boat. It's kind of
like I call it real. I say real developer, but that's okay.
No, I mean, because I waver back and forth. I have to throttle myself and say, okay, I don't need to write code for this. Go customize it, right? Sorry, configure, not customize. And I have to make sure I understand the platform before I ever get to the point of needing to write code. But I'm with you, and I think that they're making it easier and easier and easier. They're bringing all the administrative tools together. That's one thing I think they're doing, and that's everybody's been screaming about that for a few years now. So bringing all your administrative tools together and putting out solutions. In fact, on this slide, we can look at some of them. You don't think of a citizen developer as one person building an enterprise solution. You're going to have a team of people, right? You're going to have somebody who knows SharePoint. We've got some people on the call that know SharePoint, and I'm going to leverage them. And hey, I want to integrate with SharePoint using a Canvas app. I'm going to get somebody that knows a Canvas app, and then I'm going to tell them, okay, I want you to connect to CDS using the CDS connector.
Isn't the whole move to citizen developer is to avoid the IT department? That's a joke. But in reality, that's part of it, right? All of a sudden, if I'm having to pull in this expert, that expert sort of thing, I mean, citizen developers out the window at that point.
But that's the thing, you're assuming that they're developers. I'm going to bring in somebody that knows the SharePoint side of things. Doesn't mean I didn't say developer. And you got a Canvas app person who might know Canvas apps very well, and they're going to integrate with CDS using the CDS connector, just like Flow would.
But
even
in the government, you know that a lot of times these people are here. You need to make something happen, and it's like they're not bringing in anyone. It's up to them to make it happen.
A
lot of people on this call are probably in the same situation. They need to make it happen.
I completely understand, but again, I don't think that's the intention. I think you're overstating their intentions with this. I think this is putting together the capabilities allow you to build an enterprise solution without having to bring a developer on board. There's still a learning curve. I don't care what platform it is. You're still going to have to learn something, and you as a single person can't do everything. If you're expecting this to be point and click, and I've got an enterprise application by pointing and saying deploy, that does everything I think it's going to do, then I don't think any solution is going to work for you. So I think there's a happy balance. You still have to learn something. You still have to go and figure stuff out. And what they're doing, we'll just go back to this slide, the solution accelerators are a way of educating people on these different capabilities. Healthcare is a big one. It's been around for a long time, a couple of years, 2-3 years now. It's very mature, and they've actually migrated it over, and they're using, you talked about stealing IP, they're stealing their own IP and moving it into the healthcare gov, or I forget what the platform is. Nonprofit Accelerator is fairly new. Here's an example of how to build a nonprofit nonprofit accelerator using the tools in hand. It uses Flow, it uses a portal, it uses Canvas apps, it uses model-driven apps, manufacturing, finance, education, same thing.
Why would they be so nice to give that stuff to ISVs to build applications on? That doesn't make sense.
Because they want you to buy the licenses.
They
want
revenue from the ISVs that they're charging 10 or 20%.
But
we can go on from there. But
that's a different conversation. But the fact is, you asked the question about how can I keep up on things, and here's one way. There's something that I have a link for in the slides later is Center of Excellence Toolkit. They're trying to educate you on here's how you bring your team together. Here's how you foster that education in your team. So Microsoft's investing in that too. And they're building a Center of Excellence toolkit to give you pre-built tools for monitoring your environments for your administrators to make their life easier, but also for your team to say, hey, you got an app you want to build. Here's a whole slew of existing apps. Do they help you? Here's some shared solutions that you can learn from. So again, back to your question with citizen developer, I don't agree that that's going to be, it's just easy. I can point and click and have an enterprise solution, one person in an afternoon. I don't think that's the intention at all. I think the intention is to make it easier for that and to put it on a platform that gets you out of the old school world of I've got an Excel application, like what was it, the National Health Institute in the UK, right, lost all kinds of data because they hit a limit to the capabilities of Excel. Access is a common one too. I hit a limit, 2 gigs is the size or something silly like that. They want to give you an enterprise platform for building out the things you might be good at, right? I'm going to bring in somebody that knows the business side of things. Here, design out a data entry form for your team. What data do you want to collect, right? And I think that's really where the power is at. But keeping up with it, you just got to go and do it. I don't think there's any easy way around that. Hard part, I do agree with, is coming out very quickly. I know nothing about virtual agents. I know nothing about the AI chatbots. I just haven't had a reason to go into them. They're amazing and powerful, but I haven't had a reason to go into them. So if I'm working on a project as a developer, I'm going to go find somebody that understands that and bring them in.
I can tell you all of the, my expectation is that all of the M365 exams in the future will have some component of the Power Platform involved with it outside of the PL exams. So
yeah, there's a lot of overlap, and in fact, the boot camps that are going on right now, there's a lot of overlap. I just helped out with one of the M365 boot camps, and I gave a very similar talk to this because of exactly that. Most of the talk was around Office administration or SharePoint or building other solutions, and I brought this in and talked about it as a potential option, right? So I agree on that one. There's a lot of overlap, and even just the Azure world, you're going to be administering a lot of environments that, hey, I want to connect with these endpoints. I need to put, administer my authentication between applications. So the people that are administering environments aren't going to be insulated. I'm just infrastructure. I'm just network guy, right? They're going to have to understand what people are building on them. That's my take on it. So cool. So the one point of this slide that I wanted to bring up is Microsoft themselves is using Dataverse for their first-party solutions, and that's pretty cool. So what that makes me confident, and again, it's a point, if I'm deciding on building an enterprise series, one or more enterprise applications on Dataverse, I can feel confident that Microsoft's going to invest in this. Because I've actually had a question by several people like, okay, how long is this going to stick around? And as we talked about earlier a couple of times, it was Microsoft's built on this for quite a while, and they've worked on this platform for quite a long time. And if they're pushing out, customer service, sales, marketing, field services, all these different solutions on Dataverse, they're going to invest in it. And from my experience, I've, part of the MVP program, we get to talk to the product team. There's a lot going on. They're working really hard on this. So, and they're doing twice a year releases. They're putting out, they're bringing in the community to get feedback on things. So it's going to be around for a while, in my personal opinion. So we talked a lot about stuff. Let's just dive in and take a look at it, give you a little bit more hands-on feel for what we're doing. Let me pull up. I'll do it real quick. We'll just walk through and we'll just build an entity, or pardon me, table. I'll get it correct someday. We'll build a table just to show you what it's like to work in the environment. So what I have is, when I go into the Powerapps environment, what I'm looking at is an environment with a database, and that's where Dataverse comes in. And if we look at the data, they give us right away a list of tables. And this is when we talked about a common data model, and I provisioned this environment like Frank was talking about earlier. It provisioned a new database, and it gave me a whole bunch of stuff to start with, which is awesome, because that's just one less thing, or a whole bunch of things that I do not have to build. So when I bump into the environment, I go to the data section here, and there's a lot of stuff on the homepage, by the way, as you just bring it up. It's a great place to learn. Learning for entry level, some sample apps, templates you can look at, lots and lots of resources, both with Microsoft and the community. So definitely check out the homepage. And in fact, there's a Learn tab. So it's pretty cool. Learn by doing, right? But if you look at the database, the default database that was provisioned, all this stuff comes with. I didn't build any of this. These come for free, right? And I'm doing air quotes for free because you have to pay licensing. But I don't have to build out, let's just look at account real quick. I don't have to build anything to do with an account. I can just use this. And it's quite a few database fields. These are all the columns, they call them. They used to call them attributes fields. They're called columns now in the new world of Dataverse. And you can see I've got a whole slew of different types. Just sort and make it a little bit easier to see. I've got a big int, so I've got numbers. A choice is exactly what it sounds like. I've got a single choice, multiple choice, a drop down versus check boxes. I've got currency data types, so they handle money. Got a date and time, or a date only, so they handle dates really well. A decimal number, email field, which is a text field formatted as an email, floating point number. And a lookup is a really important one. We talked about this being a relational system. A lookup is effectively, if you're familiar with the database world, think of it as a foreign key. So I've got a relationship over to my parent account, self-relations there in this one. I've got a managing partner, which is a lookup to another entity. So this is free. I get this entire data table for free. I don't have to build anything, and that's just an enormous time saver. But it also, what we mentioned before, was the common data model. It follows a common specification. This is an implementation of account from the common data model. So when you talk to other enterprise systems and you want to integrate with them, you can count on talking the same language, right? You might have to do a bit of work because the platforms might be different, but if they've implemented common data model, you're in the same boat. And a couple of things you can look at, these are tabs, even though it's not really obvious. Just a little gripe, they're links, but we'll call them tabs. So I can look at all the relationships to an account. And again, they're filtered. You can see a whole bunch more. These are done for me. There's a special type called regarding, which it's a special type of table called an activity table. And I've got a couple of different relationships to it. And you've got different types of relationships. Let me just sort by name here. Many to many, many to one, and one to many. So I can have different types of relationships, whether it's a join table. Many to many would be a join table under the hood. A lookup would be a foreign key, and vice versa. And so this is where you get into the relational side of things. I'm building a relational system, a relational database service. And these are all the ones that already exist. We talk about business rules. None come out of the box for an account, but a business rule allows me to put in some simple logic for validation or automation on the main form. I haven't used them too much myself. A view is a way of saving a predefined query. and you can look at what columns are brought back with it. You can save off filter criteria. So I want to sort by account name, and there are no filters. So just show me all the accounts, and here are the columns I want to see. So it's kind of cool. You've got a query builder, and you can save off these views as part of your system. I'm going through this relatively quick. Please cut in, because I know I think we're probably a little bit over time. So please cut in if you have any questions. But I can save off a whole slew of predefined views for the system. And here's a big one, the forms. So when we talked about writing custom code, I'd have to write the database scripts, deploy it, publish everything, put all the indexes on, make sure it's efficient. Then I'd have to go build out a front end. If this is all web-based, I'd have to build out a front end and make it excuse me, put the front end on and make sure all my queries are in place. If I have a business object language in the middle where I want to, transform all the stuff coming from the database. Oh, am I getting, my frame is not loading properly. Let me reload that. So I've got a form designer. So I've got this table. I've got all these fields of all these different types. It gives me a way of defining the demo gods are not with me today. Looks like it's, I've had some script errors lately that are kind of weird. I wonder if it's the version of, well, let me pull this up and I only pull up another form. Maybe it's an old one. So I've got a form designer. Let me see if I can find one that'll bring up and work, and we can show you the designer. But that's a pretty powerful thing. So information, let's try this one. It really doesn't like that. I don't have any plugins running. Huh. It's really annoying. So that's kind of neat. You can change the view. So let me go pull up and look at the data, and we'll just pull up an account record and see it in action. I'll do add record and we'll see the form. Oh, that's what it is. Ah, that's really annoying. That's all it was. That's really frustrating. It's really secure. It logs you out periodically just to make your life hard. Let's pull up that form again. There we go. That's a little bit better. So I wasn't logged in properly, and some cookies and magic weren't being saved. So I've got a form designer here, and I can throw on all these different fields that are available as part of my table. I can put them all in the form. Obviously, that probably be bad design if you put every field on a form. But you can see that I've got a predefined designer. I can have tabs, I can have sections, and I've got different control types. If it's a date, if it's a lookup, all this stuff is predefined. I don't have to write a line of code for this. And again, if you've ever written code for this kind of thing, it can be exceedingly painful. And one of the things we're looking at here is it's got a list of related contacts. So this is some pretty cool stuff that I can just pop on a new grid for related contacts, and it just magically works, and I can configure it. Not a line of code. And again, the work that went into this is, again, years old. So it's not something they just threw together. But it's incredibly powerful for a non-developer to be able to go in and define trying to get this out of the way. And what it looks like rendered is I can change my form here, information, and here's what it looks like in action. And that's just done with configuration. There's a validation built into it, built into the table. Here's a lookup. It's going to go search for related records. That's me. These are just different record types. It could be a contact, it could be an account, phone number. It'll put in and validate phone number stuff and require different formatting. Website, it'll put in a URL for you. So that very simple little kind of cosmetic things can take an enormous amount of time, let alone just putting your fields on the form and persisting the data back to the server. Really powerful stuff. And the cool thing, what I'm looking at here is I'm debugging, I'm testing within my designer without having to deploy anything. And I just jumped over to it. I didn't really talk about it. Here's a form that's been defined as part of a table. And I just went over and said, let me test it, real-time test it. I haven't made any changes to it. If I want to make a change, I'll change it in the form designer, hit publish, hit refresh, and I've got a debugger right built into my tools. That's some pretty powerful stuff. I worked on a project recently where I didn't use any development tools at all. It was pretty cool. And that's a pretty powerful feature for this platform as a whole. So we looked at account. If I want to create one of my own, we'll just do one real quick. I've already got a what's called a solution, which allows me to package up all my stuff. And I've got what's called a Powerup event. And if I want to do new table, this is kind of cool. They've cleaned this up a bit. They've cleaned up their menu here, which is kind of nice. I can add a new database table, and you can see what I'm going to call it. We're going to manage events, and I'll go show you a real implementation of it. Powerup event. And this is going to be a table. It gives you a plural name for it. This is the schema name. This is how it's going to persist it under the hood into the data store. That's a unique schema name for it. You've got a primary field, what gets shown in the lookups. You got all kinds of additional details here. It's a standard table, activity table. That's the custom type we talked about. I've got different methods of ownership. I can have it owned by a person or no owner. It's just owned by the organization. It's got a couple different settings here for change tracking, for example, that's used in portals and some other applications. Duplicate detection built in. All this stuff, again, if I'm building a database table and I'm writing scripts for it, I'm going to have to write SQL, what is it, DDL and T-SQL, I believe. I'm going to have to write this, publish it, deploy it, put all my relations together, or use some other third-party database designer tool. But I'm getting this all in line. I can document it in line too. It's really, really powerful stuff. And I'm just going to leave it as is, and we'll create a new table. And the first thing it'll do is it'll kick off and provision a new table under the hood for me, and it's provisioning a bunch of columns. While that's happening, I can add a couple here. And if I have, you do like event start date if we're managing events, right? Oh, that was faster than I thought. You see all the stuff that comes with. All these fields are built in, and it's pretty powerful whenever you want to see who did what, when were things happening in our system. They're built in for you. I'm going to have event start date. I'm going to say it's a date and time field, and I'll do one or two fields here just to show how it works. Event end time. It's a date and time. Required, optional. I got different field values here, and you can see all the different data types that are available. A text field can be formatted differently, whole number, and all this is built into the front end. So I put this on the form. They handle how to capture dates and times. They handle how to manage choices, currency, customers, a custom field type that can have multiple different related entities to it. But it allows me very quickly. Event start time. Oh, cool! I can edit this. This is kind of new. That's a really nice feature, and as opposed to the old classic designer. And then when I'm done, I can just publish it, and I'm going to save the table. It's going to publish it out, and then once this is done, I can go through a very quick form together. Again, I know I'm talking kind of quick here, so feel free to chime in. I've got a default set of forms. I can very quickly go in and add columns that I just created to my form. Very, very simple. Edit header density. I can zoom in a bit. It's kind of neat. This is a very, very nice real world designer as opposed to the old world where it was kind of not very good. It worked very well, but it was not as WYSIWYG as you say. So I just created a new form. I can publish it. So I just in about 3 minutes of me babbling, created a new database table, created some attributes on it, built a form designer that I can go in and collect data from my end user. Only 2 fields, but if I was writing code for this, that would take me just a bit longer than it took me here. And let's go see it in action. Very, very simple, but just thrown together. And you can see it handles the date and time. I didn't write any code for that. That's pretty cool. So I can put in a start date and handle times here. Really powerful stuff. And in fact, I'm debugging and testing as I'm building. That's a pretty nice feature as well. So I was talking about this real quickly, and I was basically what I have is a solution that contains a data table that has a couple of fields, forms, views, all that fun stuff. And I did it very, very quickly. And what I haven't done is I haven't defined any security around it, but that's a bit longer of a demo. But let me go jump over to a more of a real world implementation of this. I've got a working solution over here, and I have multiple environments, by the way. So here I have a default environment, which is kind of the catch-all for everybody in your solution. I've got a production environment, and I've got another sandbox environment. And I've got a solution over here that looks very similar to what we were just talking about. And It's got a bunch more because I've been working on it for a while, but you can see I'm leveraging the out-of-the-box stuff, and I'm leveraging, and you know, account contact. I've got a web template in there, and you know, which is a portal product, which we'll look at in a moment. But I've got all these other entities, these tables that I've created. I've also got flows. I've got a model-driven app that contains everything. And let me just show you this in action, and I can open up the Powerup event while that is loading. A more fully defined event, and what I was just kind of doing very quickly there. Can't seem to hide my toolbar for Zoom. So if I look at my Powerup event, this is all the stuff that I built in, you know, while I was working on this over the last year or so. But you can see on this one event, I've got all these different capabilities, or these different attributes, pardon me, and I've got a event admin form, for example. And here's what a full form would look like. The cool thing is what I did in this event is sorry, no pun intended. I have a form built out, and I've got a bunch of related entities. Cool, I'm logged in properly, so the form's loading. And I've got a couple of tabs, and I've also got an event management business process flow, but I'm going to zoom in because that's kind of hard to see. So I've got event details, which are all the fields we talked about, event start, event end, those are date and times. I've got a couple of different flags that I'm using internally. Is it a virtual event? And, you know, I've got related contacts to this, like who's managing the event, you know, who's the primary contact. Cool thing is whenever I have the primary contact here, I've got a preview field. That's what's called a quick view form that allows me to preview details of this item that's selected here. But I've also got, more importantly, I've got related records. I've got an entity, a table called sessions, is related to an event, and it makes sense logically. I've got an event coming up like this meetup, and I've got a list of sessions. I might have more than one, and they're all going to have speakers. I've got a list of organizers related to this. I've got a list of, in this case, their contacts. In this case, I've got a list of accounts related to sponsors. File uploads, or a custom type that I built called file upload. Not very creatively named, but it allows me to have the relational side of what we've been talking about. And in the real world, let me open this up. Here's an example of one that happened in Boston. Oh wait, that was a planned event. It didn't happen, unfortunately. Let's see. And what I have here, I'm looking at my model-driven app. What I've done in my model-driven app is very simple. I've got event management. I've got a couple different tabs. Here are the tables that I've created. And by default, it just says show me all the ones and filter it by view. So all the views we were looking at, I can put onto this table, and I can pre-filter it. And here are some past events. And let's look at past community events. So I'm filtering by type, past Powerup events. Let's look at Tampa. And here's all the event details. Beth Burrell is, works at Microsoft now, but she organized these events. It allows me to capture all the details around an event, all the related sessions for an event, a whole bunch of them. You talk about some smart people. This is a crew that's crazy smart. The organizers was only Beth, and list of sponsors, file uploads. We had a couple of speaker decks, and a whole bunch of other related information about this. So very quickly, and this, it took me obviously a little bit more time than we looked at before. The cool thing about this, we talked about all the APIs and stuff. Where I can see this in action is, let me go out and come out to the portal. What's attached to this CDS session is, ignore the JSON behind the scenes. I've got a portal configured in front of this. So I have an administrative website that I built. Allows me to manage events, sessions, organizers. These are all a Dataverse, almost at CDS, Dataverse data tables related together with a front end built on top of it. This is all configuration. Nothing we're looking at here in this ever required a line of code. I think I have like one or two flows behind the scenes for other events, but the work that I did on coding was through what's called Liquid. But where I see this, I can serve up all that information through a Powerapps portal, and I can go through, and this is all done with Liquid templates. But here's the Tampa event that we were looking at. I can expose this information to the public, and all the information that's configured here, not an administrative designer, but in the admin form, I can also serve up through a portal. So all the information that's persisted in this tab over here, I'm serving up in a portal too. And this is done through what's called Liquid templates, but I'm querying all the data from Dataverse, and I'm serving it up on a custom web page through APIs that are exposed. So again, I know I'm talking very, very quickly on this, but these are just some of the capabilities. This is meant for external users. This is meant for internal licensed and authorized authenticated users. So I get a lot of capabilities with Dataverse. And again, everything we're looking at in this model-driven app, not one line of code, no plugins we were talking about. I don't even have JavaScript on this. It's just all 100% configuration. Most of the portal is configuration too for configuring the entity permissions, but this front end is done through Liquid templates. So I got a combination of configuring all the data, persisting all the data, managing all of it in a model-driven app, saved in Dataverse, but I can serve it up to the public here using what's called a Powerapps Portal. Okay, I know I was talking really fast there, but hopefully you see. If you have any questions about it, let me know, but I know we're over time at this point. Just wanted to say, here's a list of further reading. There's a lot more to it. This is just stuff that I thought would be kind of cool. So we've got the Power Platform learning resources. This is a website that's being updated continuously. So Frank, you were asking about how to keep up on this stuff. Here's one place to go. It's updated by the Microsoft team. And then if you want to get an environment for yourself to poke around, go out and check out the community plan. There's also a developer plan as well. But that's just a real easy plan. Go out and give them an account, and you can build a Power Platform solution and test it out. Documentation, standard stuff on docs@microsoft.com. Dataverse Common Data Model CUE Starter Kit, which I was talking about, talks a lot about how to administer and own a Power Platform team and enterprise, not just a solution or an app. And then the list of accelerators we talked about is being updated pretty regularly is here. And then a couple of different events. This is a slide. I forgot to update the slide, so I did this at Milwaukee. But XRM Virtual is a place to go learn about stuff. And Virtual Events Hub, talk about learning. Go check out these other virtual events at this place, this calendar, and you'll see lots of good stuff literally all over the world. It's managed out of the UK, so there's lots of good stuff there. So that's all I got on my slides. I was talking a mile a minute. Got any questions? Let me know.
Yeah, can you go back? Can you go back to your slide? Mm-hmm. So on the community plan, it basically says you need to have a work email. So if you log in with your work email, they're going to see your environment, which is fine, and it won't count against data requirements or licensing requirements. So I highly recommend people go and do this. If you don't have an Office 365 work email, there's a workaround for that. Just go out and create your own Azure tenant, which is basically free. That's going to give you create a user in there for your new tenant, and then you can go ahead and access this if you want to separate it from your true work environment. So they're going to say that you needed like an Office 365 login. That's not true. You need an Azure AD login. So there's a way around that if you're not running Office 365.
Excellent. No, great point. You can request a trial as well, but that's a good point. If you want to set up the community plan, it's a good throwaway method of doing things.
And you can keep it forever. The other thing is, I don't think you have Microsoft.com/learn here. They have a lot of stuff pumped out about this and the learning paths and all that stuff for this.
Yeah, that's true. And they've been updating that like crazy. Lots of really, really good stuff there. I'll add that to the slide. In fact, I'll get rid of the Milwaukee one. But yeah, good point. And again, anything else, I'll post it in the comments. Actually, we'll post in the comments in the meetup for everybody that wants to see it. You have a blog post about that, right? About the override for community plan?
I no longer blog about Power Platform stuff, so I removed it.
Oh, okay. Well, then I was going to put a link to your blog post out there, but never mind.
After I came out with it, amazingly, 2 months later, other people blog the same thing.
Okay. Nice. Well, but there's lots of different ways. If you have a partner account, I forget what it's called anymore. It used to be demos.microsoft.com. I don't know if it redirects still. You can get an environment there. You can get a free trial for 90 days. Pardon me.
The community plan is the best way to go and even if you're using your real work email, it's not going to count against their data usage. So that's just the best way to go long term. So people don't lose the environment.
No, the only reason I mentioned the other one is they go for 90 days and they give you all the other products too. So
right.
If you want a portal, for example, if you wanted to try out a portal, it's a real easy way of just getting one and push a button and you're done. 365, customer engagement, you get all kinds of stuff. I haven't tried much else like field service or anything like that. But yeah, I agree. That's community plan is a good one. And I'll post some more notes in there, some updates into the comments on the meetup after we're done.
You actually read my blog post. Amazing.
I keep up on these things.
Hey, Jim, thanks for that. Yeah, you were speaking a mile a minute. I don't know if you even took a breath. That was awesome.
No, sorry, you're recording, right?
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to slow it down to like 0.5 or so.
Yeah, that's fine. I wanted to make sure I got it in because it's one of those where you see it, it makes a little bit more sense. We scratch the surface too. There's a million things in this platform. Those are ones that if I'm talking to somebody who's thinking about the platform, those are some of the things I show them. It's like, look, you got a functional analyst over here who knows the business better than me as a developer. Let them do this, and then I'll come in and help out where you need me. So that's why I try to show that kind of stuff.
So for customers, they're usually going to migrate Exchange, Office 3, the Office suite, SharePoint, Power Platform, kind of in that order. And it's all, Dynamics is usually viewed as an option or near towards the end. But I think that it really makes sense to bump it up, just because if you really embrace this low-code, no-code platform, you really should consider, Dynamics early. And I think customers are going to be willing to forego some of the, detailed nitty-gritty custom aspects of, let's say .NET coding or really custom stuff to get the low-code, no-code and to get sharing. But, they're going to be at that proverbial fork in the road in terms of, do I go Salesforce or Dynamics?
Right.
What do we do to nudge them towards the Dynamics side?
That's a really good point, though, about you just brought up a moment ago about they might be able to back off on some of their requirements. I've seen that a couple of times, and it's actually really nice because you go and you talk to a customer and they're saying, well, I really needed to do this. I'm like, do you really? Like, if we don't have that functionality, can your system still work, right? And those are nice conversations to have. You can say, I can get this to you in a week versus 2 months in building a custom, right? If you just drop this one bit of functionality or move it to a later release, right? The other thing about this platform is, and we didn't really get into it too much, I think we kind of demonstrated it, is it's pretty easy to go build something, right? So bring up an environment, get a community plan, bring up an environment if you have one at work already. If you're part of a consultancy selling this stuff, bring it up and show people, build something, right? So if you dive into some of the accelerators, they're pretty extensive, but just like I'm talking to a guy who wants to sell this to somebody, and it's like, let's build a project management app. Okay, well, a lot of people know about project management. Let me show them how to manage projects. And you can do something very, very simple, very quickly, and show them like, look, now how hard would this be to do with custom dev? Would you be able to do this debugging on the fly and work with them, like with your demo, say, hey, what's another couple of fields you want to add to this? Do you have any other related entities you want to add to it? So do a design time with them. A lot of times Microsoft will actually do that. They'll do these boot camps where they'll have customers come in and they'll just sit down side by side and they'll build things out. And I think that's showing it to them and putting it in their hands does two things in my mind. It shows them the power of the platform as opposed to smoke and mirrors, right? Which we've all done, PowerPoint where, right? It's cool, here's a screen capture, but I can't show you the functionality. You can show them real functionality with something like this. Salesforce, same way, other platforms are the same way, but just put it in front of them. And if you work with them, it kind of puts them in the driver's seat, and you let them know that, like, I'm working on this with you. Like, you know the system. This is just my personal approach to things, is I don't know everything about your solution. I don't know everything about your business. So work with me on this, and we'll throw some things together. And if you want to take the driver's seat and start building an application, go for it. So putting it in front of them, showing them how quick it is to put things out. At the same time, let them know where the limitations are. Let them know the costs, right? Don't smoke and mirrors them or try to put one by them, but let them know the costs, and they can then go back and say, look, these licenses might cost X. I can go talk to a vendor and see what it costs me. Now let me spec out what it would cost to do custom dev, hosting it somewhere, and owning the code moving forward, right? So just putting it in front of them, I think, is a really powerful way of doing things, pun intended.
Jim, I got a question for you here. So we keep mentioning Dynamics, right, instead of the Power Platform. And my concern is that going into the customer, you're not if you go in and sell a sales app, then you're promoting Dynamics. If you're doing the custom dev, you're really promoting the Power Platform. I mean, so when we keep bringing up Dynamics, would you even start with Dynamics and just say, hey, I'm going with the Power Platform? And from a licensing standpoint, it probably makes more sense. Is that correct?
No, I agree. And there's actually, and I'll get a link to it. Nick Dolman does a talk, and he has a post about you may not need a CRM, right? And he talks about exactly that. And I'm completely with you. It's Dynamics refers more to the product suite as opposed to the platform, right? And it's a very good point. And it used to not be that way. That's why we still say it. We keep saying CRM. It's not CRM. It's Power Platform. It's Dataverse, right? So it depends on your customer. If you got a customer that wants customer relationship management, well, CRM is a good thing for it. If you got a customer that wants to build a nonprofit management system, I got one where I built an application system for, we built on, this is Dynamics before, it's a couple years old. We built a application submission system, right? Submit an application for benefits for public safety officers, right? And they used the case management side of things, but we didn't have to, where we could have built it from scratch using Power Platform and a Powerapps Portal. So it really depends on the conversation. If you got something that kind of leans towards capabilities offered up by the dynamic solutions, go for it. You know, the field services stuff offers a lot of custom capabilities, project management, a lot of custom capabilities. But again, if you're just building an enterprise application, totally with you. Don't talk about Dynamics, talk about Power Platform and Dataverse.
Does anybody care about field service after Ben Vollmer left? Inside joke.
Yeah. They're actually just, aren't they putting on a new mobile app for it too? I think.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, they're putting on some new stuff.
So I mean, I just want to point out that when you're going into the customer, unless they're saying, hey, we want a CRM or a sales app or you know, a true case management app that those, you know, apps are designed for, then you're really talking about the Power Platform and all the different components that it brings.
Well, and think of it this way. I agree, because a lot of times I went in and I had a project I had a couple of years ago, and it was this was the customer that hired me, the vendor that hired me, the consulting company. After like 18 months on the project, guy asked me what CRM was, and I'm like, dude, really? And it's like it was hard talking to him, because like, I don't want to do customer relationship management. I want a system that does this. So even if you talk about CRM, it might confuse them. They might turn it down, you know, right out, because it's like, I don't want CRM. I'm not doing customer relationship. I want a platform. And if you go in talking about Dataverse, you talk about the common data model under the hood, all that stuff, and then you say, oh, you want to do customer management, maybe you should look at this, you know, customer service, or they changed the names on it. What is it called now? Service
now?
No. It's customer engagement. It's not customer engagement anymore. It is customer service. Yeah, sorry. Because I got lectured, customer engagement is on-prem and customer service is online, or vice versa. So if you start talking to them, find out what their business problem is, to Frank's point, and then you can say, oh, one of the products in the Dynamic Suite might meet that need. Maybe we start there, and then you have a lot less. Then it's just configuration as opposed to development. If you want to build something that doesn't meet any of those needs, then, well, yeah, start with a bare bones Dataverse environment and go from there.
The lines kind of blur, right? I mean, a CRM, you know, I mean, an enterprise case management system is kind of like CRM. You know, there's data relationships, and it's, you know, enterprise wide. But if they, you know, I see a lot of business in the case management world. Are we gonna, if somebody asks for that, are we whipping out Dynamics to do that, or are we whipping out Power Platform, Powerapps to do that?
Well,
we're using Dataverse for both.
No, it's a matter of, think of it this way. If I'm building customer engagement, I want specific processes and data collection around customer engagement, right? Case management, for example. With customer engagement, and I might be getting it backwards, customer service, customer engagement, you get what's called an incident, right? Under the hood is called an incident. It's a case entity. With Dataverse, you don't get that. So if you start with Dataverse, you get contacts, you get accounts, you get all the security, you get all the other capabilities for building on your own custom entities. When you buy the product, you know, the Dynamics product, you then get their entities built called incident case management. They leverage more stuff around the business processes around managing a case. It's meant for case management specifically.
You have to look at the features and functionality that that the customers care about versus building it out on your own. Okay, so do I care about vacation days and work hours, right? That's going to be important, if that's drives their business, well, then you're going to be going out using Dynamics customer service or whatever it's called. You don't want to build that out on your own by building your own custom, case entity and going from there. So you just have to look at the features. I have to say on the government side, probably 90% of the XRM applications were around case management, but most of them, you spent more time stripping out the functionality that Dynamics case management was bringing and putting in your own custom stuff, right? Well, at that point in time, you're just going to go over to, the Power Platform, CDS, and build your own thing, right? And then you also take a look at the pricing difference between the two products. And there's a lot of things to take into consideration about that. And you say, hey, I really need this feature, but it increases my cost by X. For me to build it is Y. Well, it makes more sense for me to build it or vice versa, right?
Yep.
So you just have to take a look at that in making those calls. But I would not run in and say, hey, Dynamics is the thing that gets you in the door. It's Power Platform, it's Azure all up as a platform. I had customers that were saying, hey, we had so-and-so Gartner come in or whatever, and they say, hey, when you're looking at Dynamics, don't look at just Dynamics, look at the entire Power Platform, Azure, and everything that's bringing to the table in full, and that's where the most value is for an enterprise organization.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That's totally true. If you come in and you say, look, I already have SharePoint, and I've built a lot of stuff, because you see a lot in the DoD space, right? SharePoint for years was their development platform, for better or for worse. And they did a lot of cool stuff on it. So I already got SharePoint, I've already got Active Directory, I've already got all this other stuff in place, but I want to bring in a case management, I want to implement ServiceNow, right? Or another one, Pegasystems, I believe, is another one that I've seen thrown around. I don't know much about either of them personally, but to Frank's point, wait, you've already got all this other stuff. You've already got the Microsoft stack in place. Maybe look at, Dataverse as an option for enterprise development. Oh, okay, you've got case management, or you've got, marketing, right? Marketing is a very powerful tool, does a lot of cool stuff. You got those? Okay, well then you're probably easier just to get a license for one of those products. Integration is already there. It's built, like SharePoint and Dataverse integration is configurable. Out of the box, it does integration with SharePoint natively. It may not be what exactly you want to do, but you can point and click and turn it on. And you don't have to build out other integrations. So that's definitely something. What is your current your current infrastructure look like, and then you decide whether you want to bring in Dataverse, because it's not the be all end all solution. It really just isn't. I mean, I'm biased. I use it. It's what I do. It's my bread and butter. But there's some limitations to it, so it may not be the best solution for you. But going in with the knowledge of what they currently have in place is going to be a big first step for you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, definitely use Power Platform as the carrot stick, and then upsell to Dynamics. In terms of the old days of custom dev, whether it be .NET or Java, and then a 3-tier SQL database with a DBA, in Power Platform development, are we insulated with Dataverse specifically? Are we insulated from needing to write SQL statements and triggers and SQL language?
You're actually not just insulated, you're prevented. It's not allowed. Yeah, it used to be in the on-prem world, you had access to everything, and you installed, let's say right now you can go out and download the on-prem version of it's still called Dynamics 365, I believe, and not CRM, but it's Dynamics 365 if I remember right. And you can install it and require SQL Server. You stand up the instance, you install it, you put in a web front end, all that fun stuff, and you can have access to the database, and you can go in and do whatever you want to it. But Microsoft's not going to talk to you if you got a problem, right? Mm-hmm. And people did that all the time. They wrote reports against it, and they offer up ways to insulate you even in the on-prem. With the cloud, and that's why I was emphasizing services at the very beginning, you're not allowed to touch things, because they move it over. You don't even know what instance the reporting server is on. It creates a problem whenever you want to automate report creation. So you're absolutely not allowed. Now, they've opened up, they have APIs for everything. So I can go in and I can write a query against the schema, the metadata, and I can have built some tools to do it using the third-party SDK, or sorry, using the Dynamics SDK. What if they? I don't know if they call it the Dataverse SDK.
Jim,
but well, hang on. But you can go and you can act on that, but it's an abstraction layer. You have no direct access to any of the underlying SQL Server instance information at all.
So this is what plugins are for, okay? But you're not doing direct access. You're going to be utilizing. I've been writing KQL stuff, which is Azure Sentinel. So I don't even know the proper term for the query language anymore. Fetch XML, there we go. You're going to be writing Fetch XML or whatever to go and query the database, and you can do all that sort of work and updating and writing other records that you would normally do with inside triggers with inside SQL. You're actually just doing it in C#, utilizing their libraries to go and access the columns and the data that's being passed across. The good news is that a lot of the stuff that you used to write in SQL for, let's say, cascading deletes or don't delete if there's a child record and all that other fun stuff. A lot of that standard repetitive code that you did before is actually handled with inside the platform for you. When you saw Jim creating the relations between two different tables or entities, and those relationships are there, you can set something called relationship behaviors. And those relationship behaviors do a lot of that integrity sort of work and changes to child records or whatever that you used to do in writing triggers. But you will no longer be writing triggers or writing transact SQL. You'll be writing that sort of work now is what's called plugins, and you'll be writing in something called Fetch XML to query the tables.
Well, they've actually, in the last release, they did open up, you can use SQL, but not in the sense that you're thinking. You're not going to open up Management Studio and write SQL and have it persisted to the database. They've given you a way of calling SQL or writing SQL for your code, but it's not what you think, right?
It's mainly for report writing.
No, it's actually for plugins and code and all kinds of other stuff. You can call it from standard connections. They've just put an abstraction on top of it. So the report writing you used to call views and all that fun stuff. This is with the last release they put out. They opened up this query language. So you can write it, but again, it's more for business logic than it would be for database administration, right? It would be something you could write a report against it. It's not actually accessible through SSRS, unfortunately. It's not supported yet. But if I'm writing code in a plugin and I want to write SQL as opposed to Fetch XML, I can do that. I've only played with it myself, but it's so when you read about it, the only reason I mention it is you'll probably read about the SQL support in Dataverse, but it's not quite what you think. It's cool. It's actually really neat. It's a nice feature because some people still think in the SQL world. But it's whenever you read about it, it won't be what you're talking about. The database administration, like Frank said, is all handled by the platform. And in fact, you have no idea where the database is at. You don't know where, like we talked about earlier, like an image isn't going to be stored in SQL. It's going to be stored in some other service, but you don't care. You just make this call to an API and you get back what you need.
Makes sense. Thanks for that.
So I'm sorry, I'm looking at your questions. I think we were just talking about that. We were just talking about all the relations. That's a thing I used to call, like I said, back when I first did this presentation years ago on XRM, I used to call it a database designer tool. And effectively, you're still doing that, but it's just, there's a bit more of an abstraction. It's not just SQL Server designer tool. It's more than that now, which is pretty cool. So did I miss any other questions? Like I said, sorry, I wasn't paying attention to them.
No, I think you hit them all.
Well, we got the learning stuff there. Cool. We'll put some more stuff out. Put the notes out, like Frank said, about how to get the community plan. Cool. We got those. I'm just going up to, I don't know if you can see what I'm looking at. Does that show up? The chat thing show up? Yeah, the Dynamics COE Toolkit, definitely check that out. Cool thing about the COE Toolkit, go look at some of the Ignite sessions about it, because it's not just a series of code, and solutions and whatnot. They more talk about the mindset around managing your team, managing an enterprise. Whenever you bring up an enterprise with Power Platform, they want to encourage their developers, citizen developers or otherwise, they would encourage people to leverage the platform. So it's kind of neat. It's more than just, here's a bunch of solutions to install to monitor what people are doing. It's meant to encourage them and give them, enable them. So it's kind of neat.
Perfect.
And cool. So I apologies for going over. Thanks for all the questions. I'm glad it was kind of fun for me personally. I like more of a conversation than me talking, especially when I babble so fast. So I appreciate it. And I'll send you the slides. That way you can post them, or I'll post them on the comments in the meetup. Is that cool?
Definitely.
Awesome.
I think the stars aligned today with getting Frank Greenberg on the phone here, Jim. You and Frank, the combination really made it very warm and very enjoyable as well. But yeah, really appreciate you. Hope to have you again, and I wish you a healthy and happy 2021. We'll get out the video, and if you can get me your slide deck, we'll share that out. I'll also get you, some of the contacts on this call as well, so you can reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, and same, you post my website, you saw my information in the slides. Drop me a line, got any questions or comments, or as I mentioned, any suggestions either. I know there's a lot of different background on the call too. I'd be glad to hear of different experiences, and I wasn't joking, always looking to learn.
Thanks again.
Cool.
Well,